Hey folks, hope you had a great weekend. I know if you're like me, you are beyond excited about the National Basketball Association, about the NBA season starting anew. I am Sixers silly. I am trusting the process. I am beyond excited to watch Tyrese Maxey continue his superstardom, to watch VJ Edgecombe emerge as an NBA star, to watch Joel Embiid come back onto the floor and play meaningful and impactful minutes for the Sixers. I'm all in. But while that is incredibly important in my town, in Philly, perhaps one of the biggest stories of this year's NBA is LeBron James coming back for his 23rd season, which is staggering. And with LeBron's return, I saw some facts about the last time the NBA season started where LeBron was not a player. The flash drive had not yet been invented the last time LeBron James was not involved with the NBA. There was no Uber. There was no Lyft. Facebook had not yet been created. When LeBron James started in the NBA, Kelly Clarkson had just won American Idol. Found all of that by Googling. And I continued Googling to learn more about what was going on back before LeBron James had started playing. And what I came across, and it probably will not surprise you, is some mockery of LeBron, some pejorative comments about his age and whether he should be able to continue to play in the NBA and whether he'll be able to continue to play at such a high level. And I had a couple of thoughts when I read these mocking comments, these pejorative comments about LeBron's age. First, he's 40. He's not going to be 41 until December. He's 40. Like, can we all pump the brakes and take a breath for just a moment? He's not playing in the NBA at age 97. He's 40. And while that is an incredible accomplishment, I mean, again, let's pump the brakes. Second, what it got me thinking about was all of the bias that we deal with, not only in our lives, but specifically and importantly in our workplaces that deal with age. The unconscious and unintended stereotyping based on someone's age is so pervasive and is so problematic. This kind of insidious way of thinking so meaningfully is destructive and deleterious to our working environment. And in my experience, this kinds of age bias really comes in two different forms. There is the, for lack of a better phrase, traditional age bias, which is based on who? It's based on the inappropriate treatment, the inappropriate stereotypical thinking about older people. And I have never understood this kind of thinking. I've never understood why we want to chase away from our workplaces institutional knowledge, why we want to chase away from our workplaces industry knowledge. As someone, and I say this with no false humility, as someone who is very rarely, if ever, the smartest person in any room I am in, I want to surround myself with experience. I want to surround myself with people who are smarter than I am and have more experience than I do, who will tell me that I am wrong and that there is a better way to do things. Surrounding ourselves with sycophants who will just tell us we're right is not how leaders lead. So I constantly want to surround myself with people with different views when we deal with age, with different experiences and more experience than I have. I went to Temple University School of Law. For law school. I graduated in 1997. And Temple really had meaningful diversity. And it was not just diversity based on race, which we had. It was not just diversity based on gender, which we had. My law school, I think my graduating class was like 52% women. We had people with differing abilities. We had people with different national origins. One of the most meaningful, and I thought the coolest forms of diversity that Temple had, and it was really unique in the law school environment, was age-based diversity. Because of the cost of Temple at the time, there were a lot of people who were second, third careers in my classes. There were people who were dropping in. There were people who were just taking classes because they wanted to learn. And I very much in law school had imposter syndrome. I was super, super worried about getting answers wrong, that people would think I was a fraud, that I wasn't that smart. And I'll never forget the way I used to prepare for class. If I had 3 cases to read, I would read all 3 cases and I would create an outline for each case. And then I would go back and I would read the cases again. And I would create a second outline from my first outline. And then I would go back and I would read the cases for a 3rd time and create the 3rd outline. It helped me get through the nervousness and the anxiousness. And again, this sort of imposter syndrome. And I'll never forget, I was in my torts class, first year, and I hear my professor, Mr. Cohen, why did the court decide this way? And I'm sitting there thinking, all right, cool. You know, I've read these cases 3 times. I've outlined them 3 times. I got you, prof. Here's the holding of the case. What were the facts of the case, Mr. Cohen? Boom, ripped off the facts. Why did the court decide this holding based on these facts? And I gave the professor the reasoning. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm 3 for 3. I'm all puffed up. I'm feeling good about myself. And then I hear the professor say to me, well, Mr. Cohen, why did the court decide this way? And I went back and I gave the professor the facts and I gave the professor the holding and I gave the professor the reasoning. And the professor looked at me again and said, no, Mr. Cohen, that's not what I asked. I asked, why did the court decide this way? And I was stuck. I was stymied. I felt my body turning red. I felt myself starting to get embarrassed. And sitting a couple of seats away from me was a gentleman who I suspect was in his 60s. He was one of our drop-ins. He sat a couple of seats away from me and he saw me struggling. He looked over at me and said, Mike, sit down, I got you. And I'm sure that's not what he said. I'm sure he said it much more articulately than that. But I sat down and he stood up and he explained to the professor what was happening in the United States, in the world, what the geopolitical situation was at the time, which is exactly what the professor wanted. It was information to which I did not have access because I was like 26 at the time, 25 at the time. But he lived it. And that stuck with me. And to this day, I have never understood and I will never understand why we want to chase that kind of knowledge out of our workplaces. We need to do away with this unintended, with this insidious, with this stereotype thinking about older people. Now, there's also another form of age-based bias that we've all seen over the course of the last many years. In the 54 years that I have been on this planet, I have never seen 2 groups so consistently and fundamentally and without being defended against crapped all over than the way we treat millennials and Gen Zs. Millennials don't grind. That has not been my experience at all. Millennials job hop. I mentioned a moment ago, I'm 54 years old. I have buddies of mine who are on their 16th, 17th jobs. We are hardly millennials. Millennials, Gen Zs, spend too much time focusing on mental health. First of all, I don't even understand what that sentence means. Second, shouldn't we be thanking these groups of people for finally getting us to pay attention to those things that matter and which we should have been paying attention to for an awfully long time? We have got to do away with, we have got to mitigate against and minimize as much as possible this archaic, this anachronistic, this stereotype thinking about people of a certain age. LeBron James will turn 41 in December. He will play his 23rd National Basketball Association season, and he will do it, I am certain, at an exceedingly high level. And if we had people in decision-making positions in the NBA who thought LeBron's too old, LeBron's too slow, LeBron's not strong enough because of his age, all of us would miss out on an epic experience watching arguably the greatest player do it at an age that nobody's ever done it before. Thanks so much, friends. I appreciate, as always, your watching. I appreciate, as always, your commenting and your sharing. Trust the process. Get Sixer silly. Hope to see you real soon.